A mother leaves without saying goodbye, hiding a painful past and a dangerous secret to protect her son. 20 years later, when her son finds her, buried truths and old wounds resurface. Will the truth heal their broken bond, or will it shatter them forever? Hi everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air is cool enough to make you pull your jacket tight, yet the golden glow of the setting sun feels warm against your skin. I stood at the edge of a familiar street, my heart racing, my breath uneven. Memories I had buried long ago surged to the surface. Laughter in the kitchen, the smell of fresh pancakes on Sunday mornings, the sound of little feet running down the hallway. But all of that was a lifetime ago. 20 years had passed since I walked away from it all, without a word, without a goodbye. Back then, I thought I had no choice. I believed I was doing the right thing. But every step I took that led me further from my family, especially from my little boy, felt like a wound that would never heal. As the years went by, the silence between us grew heavier, filled with regret, unanswered questions, and a pain that words could never fix. I told myself it was better this way. I convinced myself I was protecting him, but life has a way of catching up with you, even when you think you've outrun it. And now, after all these years, my son has found me. The moment I dreaded, the one I thought I'd never face, is here. And with it comes a secret, one I've carried like a weight around my heart. The truth I never had the courage to tell, the truth that shattered everything, is finally going to come out. As I stand on the threshold of a reunion I can't predict, one question lingers. Will love be enough to bridge the chasm of time and pain? Or will this final revelation be the end of what little hope remains? Stay with me as we uncover the story that's been waiting 20 long years to be told. The door felt heavier than I remembered, as if the years had added weight to it, just like they had to my heart. I raised my hand to knock, but hesitated, my fingers trembling as I pulled them back. How do you knock on the door of a life you abandoned? How do you step back into a world that moved on without you? I could picture him on the other side, no longer the boy with wide, curious eyes and scraped knees. He would be a man now, maybe with the same sharp chin and quiet strength I had seen in him as a child. Would he recognize me? Would he even want to? The thought clawed at my chest. My mind raced back to the day I left, a moment frozen in time. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, and I remember watching my son play with his toy cars on the floor, his soft giggles filling the room. I wanted to hold him so badly it hurt, but fear gripped me tighter. I had convinced myself that walking away was my only choice. I told myself that leaving was love, protecting him from truths too dark for a child to carry. But in my heart, I knew it was more complicated than that. Love was tangled with shame and mistakes, a web I couldn't untangle then, and I'm not sure I can now. Every letter I never sent, every word I never said, had built a wall between us, brick by painful brick. And now, I was standing outside that wall, wondering if it was too late to break through. I finally knocked. The sound echoed in my ears, louder than I expected, and my pulse quickened. Footsteps approached. My breath caught. When the door opened, his eyes met mine. Time seemed to stop. those same eyes I had seen every night in my dreams. But now, they held something else, something guarded, something broken. Before I could speak, his voice, low and steady, cut through the silence. Why now? The question hung between us like a weight I wasn't ready to lift. Why now? How do you explain 20 years of silence in one answer? My mouth opened, but no words came. And that secret, the one I had carried all these years, was the only thing standing between us. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his question press against my chest like a heavy stone. Why now? The words echoed in my mind, unraveling all the reasons I had rehearsed on my way here. My silence stretched too long, and I saw it, the flicker of hurt that flashed across his face before he quickly masked it with a stoic expression. The word caught in my throat. I had planned for this moment. I thought I had prepared for every possible reaction. But the truth was, there was no preparing for the look in my son's eyes. A man now, but in that instant, I could still see the child he had been, the boy who waited by the window, hoping I'd come back. I wanted to explain. I finally managed, my voice softer than I intended. I never stopped thinking about you, not for a single day. He leaned against the door frame, his arms crossed. There was distance in his posture, a wall I wasn't sure I could climb. Thinking about me isn't the same as being there, he said, each word like a dagger. I grew up without you. Do you know what that was like? I wanted to reach for him, but my hands stayed by my sides, weighed down by guilt. I left because I thought I was protecting you, I whispered, but the words sounded weak even to my own ears. Protecting me? His laugh was bitter, sharp. You left without a word. No letters, no calls, nothing. Do you know how many nights I wondered what I did wrong? How many birthdays I sat there waiting, hoping maybe this year you'd come back? His voice cracked, and he quickly looked away, his jaw tightening. My heart shattered into pieces I couldn't even gather. Every word he said was a truth I had feared. It wasn't your fault, I said, stepping closer. You were never the reason I left. There was so much you didn't know, so much I couldn't tell you. Then tell me now, he said, his eyes piercing into mine. The secret burned on my tongue, desperate to be free, but saying it out loud would break everything wide open. And once it was spoken, there would be no turning back. The air between us grew heavier, thick with words left unsaid and years of silence that couldn't be erased. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears, each beat a reminder of how much I had lost. He stood there, waiting, his eyes burning with a mixture of anger, pain, and something else, something I couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Or was it just the ghost of it, barely hanging on? I took a breath, but it felt shallow, like I couldn't pull enough air into my lungs. You deserve the truth, I began, my voice shaking, but it's not an easy story to tell. Try me, he said, his tone sharp, but not without a trace of vulnerability. I searched his face, looking for a sign that he was ready to hear it, that he wanted to hear it. But all I found was the weight of my own hesitation. My hands trembled as I clenched them into fists at my sides. My secret wasn't just painful. It was a scar carved deep into my soul, one I had tried to forget but could never fully escape. That day, I started, my words slow, cautious. The day I left, I wasn't running from you. I was running from a mistake that I couldn't undo, something that changed everything. His eyes narrowed. What mistake? My chest tightened as I looked down, unable to meet his gaze. The truth was a storm inside me, raging to break free. I opened my mouth, but fear strangled the words before they could escape. I felt trapped between the past and the present, the walls of my guilt closing in. "You don't understand," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I didn't want to leave, but I had no choice. "There's always a choice," he snapped, stepping forward. His voice trembled with the force of his emotions. "You chose to leave me. You chose to disappear without a word. How do you think that felt? I needed you." The rawness in his voice shattered something inside me. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them away. "I thought I was doing the right thing," I said, my voice breaking. "I thought staying would hurt you more." "Then tell me why," he demanded, his voice quieter now, but the tension only grew. "What could be so terrible that you had to leave your own child behind?" The answer was there, teetering on the edge of my lips, ready to explode into a truth that could change everything. My heart thundered in my chest as I opened my mouth, the truth fighting its way out, like a scream trapped for far too long. I had to say it. He deserved to know. But as I began to speak, a voice, sharp and familiar, cut through the air behind me. "Don't." I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed as I turned slowly toward the sound. There, standing just a few feet away, was a figure from the past I thought I had left behind forever. My breath caught as a flood of memories surged back, moments I had buried, faces I had tried to forget. He was older now, his eyes harder, but the power he had once held over me was still there, like a shadow stretching long across my life. His presence here was impossible, and yet undeniable. My son's brow furrowed as he glanced between us, confusion and suspicion clouding his face. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice tense. "What's going on?" I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. "You weren't supposed to be here," I whispered to the man, my voice low but trembling with the force of my fear. "And yet, here I am," he said, a cold smile playing on his lips. "You didn't think you could run forever, did you?" My son stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "Someone tell me what's happening." The man's gaze shifted to him, and his expression darkened. "You really never told him, did you?" He shook his head, a mocking laugh escaping his lips. "After all this time, still keeping secrets." "Enough," I said, my voice firm but barely masking my panic. "No, it's time he knows," the man continued, his tone dripping with menace. "Tell him the truth, or I will." I felt the ground shift beneath me as the past I had fought so hard to escape crashed headlong into the present. My secret wasn't just a wound. It was a weapon, one that could destroy everything I had left. My son's eyes were locked on mine now, filled with a mixture of pain, anger, and desperate hope. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What are you hiding?" The storm I had tried to outrun was here, and there was no more time to run. The silence felt like it could break me. My son's eyes, wide with fear and anger, searched mine for answers. I had spent 20 years running from this moment, believing I was protecting him from a truth too dark to share. Now, with nowhere left to hide, I felt my heart clench painfully as the weight of my choices pressed down on me. "The truth," I whispered, my voice trembling, "is that I was scared of what he would do if I stayed." I nodded toward the man, my past in human form, a living reminder of the chains I had worn in secret. My son's face darkened, confusion twisting into something sharper. "What do you mean?" I took a breath, the air sharp and cold in my lungs. "He wasn't just someone I knew. He controlled me. Every part of my life was a prison. I thought if I left without a word, I could break free. But I was wrong." I looked into my son's eyes, my voice breaking with emotion. "I didn't just leave because of him. I left because I was protecting you." "From me?" the man sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "That's a convenient lie." "You threatened us," I shot back, my voice louder now. "I knew if I stayed, you would ruin us both. So I ran to keep my son safe." The room seemed to pulse with tension. My son stood frozen, processing every word. "You left because you were afraid he'd hurt me?" "Yes," I whispered. "I've carried that fear every day since. And I know my silence hurt you, but I did it because I loved you more than anything." He turned to the man, his jaw clenched, fury rising in his eyes. "You don't belong here." For the first time, the man faltered, his power slipping as he realized he had lost. He smirked, but his eyes betrayed his defeat. Some secrets never stay buried. As he walked away, my son faced me again, his eyes softer now. "You should have told me," he said, his voice cracking. "I know," I whispered, tears spilling freely. "I'm so sorry." And in that moment, as the weight of years lifted, I saw not just pain, but forgiveness. Yet even as relief washed over me, a final thought whispered in my mind. Some scars never truly fade. The air felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the truth had swept away the weight that had hung between us for so long. My son stood in front of me, no longer a boy full of questions, but a man who had finally begun to understand the story behind my silence. We didn't speak for a long moment. The noise of the world outside faded, leaving only the quiet connection that had never truly been broken. I wanted to reach for him, to close the distance created by years of pain, but I waited, unsure if he was ready. "I don't know if I can forget," he said softly, his eyes fixed on the ground, "but maybe I can try to forgive." Tears welled in my eyes, but this time they weren't born of fear or regret. They were tears of hope. "That's all I've ever wanted. I never stopped loving you. I never will." His gaze lifted, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something I had been too afraid to hope for: acceptance. It wasn't complete, not yet. Healing would take time, but this was a beginning, a bridge between us built on truth rather than the lies of omission. "I just needed to know you cared," he said. "I cared more than you'll ever know," I whispered. "And now I'll be here, always." We stood together, the past still raw but no longer a barrier. The man who had haunted my life was gone, but the scars he left would remain. Yet now they didn't feel so heavy. They were part of my story, but they no longer defined it. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, my son gave a small, tentative smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was enough.